In August 2018, the small Central American country of El Salvador severed diplomatic ties with Taiwan. For many, this news was probably the only time they had heard of the nation. Today, we're going to tell you a story about a notorious global gang with ties to this country. As always, before diving into the full story, please consider hitting the like button to support ADB Crime Case. Don't forget to subscribe to get notified about our latest investigations. Now, let's begin. When you talk about the world's most brutal gangs, Mississippi 13 is a name you can't ignore. Dubbed the most frightening gang in America, this organization has not only spread terror across the U.S., but has also extended its reach throughout Central America. The gang originated in the 1980s with Salvadoran immigrants in Los Angeles, starting as a small group trying to survive on the streets. Over time, it transformed into a notorious criminal empire, specializing in murder, drug trafficking, human trafficking, money laundering, and ruthlessly killing anyone who gets in their way. So what turned MS-13 into a nightmare for both police and the public? What crimes made the U.S. government put this organization on its list of top targets to be eliminated? Let's go back to the 1970s. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, influenced by the Cuban and Nicaraguan revolutions, El Salvador, a country long ruled by a military dictatorship, couldn't avoid a full-scale civil war. The ones who suffered the most were the unarmed civilians. When the Civil War broke out, a massive number of Salvadoran refugees, along with refugees from other Central American nations, poured into the United States. Statistics show that from the early 1980s to the 1990s, the number of Salvadoran refugees in the U.S. increased from 94,000 to 465,000 in just one decade. The life of these refugees was difficult. Even though they escaped the war and fled to the U.S., their future was bleak. Young people faced discrimination and bullying in schools and factories. Poverty and oppression were everywhere, especially during a time of severe racial segregation. They lived in the most dangerous slums, tormented not only by white people, but also by black people. To survive, some young Salvadoran refugees in Los Angeles, fueled by national hatred, united and formed a gang they named MS-13. The MS stands for the Spanish Mara Salvatrucha, and the number 13 inches represents 13th Street in Los Angeles, where the gang was founded. The name can be interpreted as the Salvadoran Savages from 13th Street. The signature MS-13 hand sign is made by folding the ring and middle fingers into the palm, with the index and pinky fingers extended on both sides and the thumb pressing down on the middle and ring fingers. This sign is said to represent the head and two horns of Satan, also known as the Devil's Horns. Another hand sign is South Side, which indicates that MS-13 represents Southern California. Initially, they just wanted to protect their fellow countrymen from bullying. But later, a large number of refugees from Nicaragua, Guatemala, and other Central American countries joined their ranks. As the number of members grew, the organization became increasingly dangerous. They started taking out their anger on other neighborhoods. In the latter half of the 1980s, turf wars between MS-13 and other local gangs erupted almost daily on the streets of Los Angeles. The fires of this gang war began to spread to other states, where MS-13 branches started to appear. At this time, some Salvadoran guerrillas also fled to the U.S. Some chose to join MS-13, and these young people who had endured the trials of war naturally became the core force of the gang. After forming an alliance with the Mexican gang Los Zetas, MS-13's power grew significantly, causing major headaches for U.S. authorities. In 1992, El Salvador's 12-year civil war finally ended. The U.S. seized this opportunity to begin a mass deportation of immigrants. By 1996, the U.S. government officially passed a law to crack down on undocumented immigrants. This law allowed for the deportation of any immigrant criminal sentenced to 1 year or more in prison. In a short period, tens of thousands of undocumented immigrants were deported, including a large number of MS-13 members. Ironically, this U.S. deportation law inadvertently fueled MS-13's later growth. The majority of the deported immigrants had no prior criminal records in their home country. Many had left their homeland as children, and some didn't even speak Spanish. When they were sent back to El Salvador, a foreign land to them, their future became uncertain. In this situation, these young people with no future were determined to turn El Salvador into MS-13's headquarters, vowing to regain control of the streets. They perfected MS-13's organizational structure and established the notorious Committee of Nine to divide power within the gang. Next, they re-established contact with the scattered MS-13 members in the U.S., forming branches in many states. The leaders of these branches were responsible for local communities and for carrying out criminal activities, turning MS-13 into a transnational crime syndicate specializing in human trafficking, weapons smuggling, drug trafficking, and murder for hire. Currently, drugs are not MS-13's main source of profit. The gang's most serious issue is human trafficking. The gang's growth requires continuous recruitment of new members. For minors, the rule for joining is simple. They just need to abandon their humanity and participate in some criminal activities with other members to be recognized as part of MS-13 and to receive protection within the community. However, for adults, joining MS-13 is not easy. According to some former MS-13 members who risked leaving the gang, once they're out, they'll be hunted for the rest of their lives. New male recruits are given the task of randomly assaulting or murdering a passerby as an initiation rite. But this is only the first challenge. After that, males have to go through an initiation ritual, being beaten by other members without crying out. For females, they are forced to have sex with dozens of gang members. MS-13 members initially used large body tattoos to distinguish themselves from other street gangs. These prominent tattoos were once a clear identifying mark, and in the past, only official members had the right to tattoo the MS symbol on their bodies. However, MS-13 has now changed its strategy to avoid detection and pursuit by law enforcement. They have restricted tattooing for members, and those who previously had tattoos on their faces are gradually being excluded from the gang. In 2008, the U.S. FBI released a report on MS-13, stating that gang members had appeared in 42 states across the U.S., with an estimated global membership of about 50,000 people. By October 2017, the U.S. Department of Justice officially identified MS-13 as a key target for suppression. MS-13 members, from the top down, live by three principles: kill, rape, and control. The more people you kill, the more you're respected. The more innocent women you rape, women hoping to immigrate to the U.S., the more you turn them into victims of the human trafficking ring. They use violence to control everything they want to control. The mass murders on Long Island and the attack on Roosevelt Hospital in Guatemala are just two examples of their horrific crimes. On July 28, 2017, then U.S. President Donald Trump gave a speech on Long Island, urging domestic organizations and Central American nations to unite and crack down on the MS-13 gang. In the year before the speech, dozens of murders related to MS-13 had occurred in the Long Island area. The victims were mostly teenagers, and they were all brutally tortured before they died. Some of the bodies were severely disfigured and mutilated to varying degrees. One of the most typical cases happened in September 2016, when the bodies of two female high school students were found on the street. The cause of death was a brutal beating. According to the police investigation, the two students had gotten into an online argument with MS-13 members before they were killed, and they immediately became targets for punishment. After Trump's speech, Mississippi 13 didn't reduce its criminal activities. Instead, it carried out a series of revenge attacks in the U.S. and Central American countries. One of the most serious incidents occurred in August 2017, about a week after Trump's first speech on Long Island. Roosevelt Hospital in Guatemala City was attacked by armed MS-13 members, leaving 7 people dead and 13 injured. The public outcry was pushed to its peak, forcing authorities to step up the manhunt for criminals. By October 2017, Guatemalan authorities finally arrested the mastermind, Angel Gabriel Reyes Marin. His nickname was White Angel Gabriel, and he was 28 years old at the time. Reyes was the leader of MS-13 in Guatemala. He had been arrested in 2004 but escaped from prison that same year. According to several sources, he was also a leader of the Committee of 9. Authorities estimated he was involved in at least 287 murders in the area. The arrest of a major crime lord gave a boost to the public and the authorities. But did it really deal a fatal blow to MS-13? The answer is no. A quick Google search today still shows revenge killings related to MS-13. Persistent poverty and political instability in Central American countries make many people want to migrate to the U.S. or Europe in search of better opportunities. MS-13 exploits this desire, engaging in human trafficking because the gang believes it's a safe and easy way to make money. Here's a typical example. In 2009, police in Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia simultaneously raided and shut down 9 child prostitution rings and rescued a large number of underage girls. Most of them were between 12 and 14 years old. All 9 locations were controlled by MS-13, and from the raids, police arrested Rivas Amaya, a minor MS-13 boss in Virginia. He was only 21 years old at the time and had the nickname the Assassin. According to Amaya's confession, the girls were lured there from El Salvador and other Central American countries. At first, they were promised they would be sent to the U.S. for development. When they arrived in the U.S. by various means, all of their documents were immediately confiscated. Then, gang members raped them, injected them with drugs, and brought them to the brothel to become prostitutes. A girl would usually service 7 to 10 customers a night, charging $100 to $200 per session. According to one victim, Amaya also set some rules that other gang members involved in the case jokingly called the 10 Commandments. Customers had to use 3 condoms. If you got pregnant, you would be worthless and die. You couldn't reveal your real age and name, or you would die. The girls had to scream loudly during sex so customers could finish quickly. Any customer request had to be met on the condition that the customer paid more money. In 2011, Amaya was tried and sentenced to 10 years in prison, and 3 years later, he was released. For U.S. police, this was a successful operation to crack down on a gang-controlled prostitution ring. But for MS-13, it was just a small part of their illegal business and did not affect the entire criminal system. For the victims, their lives may have been lost forever. The girls were injected with drugs, tortured, and abused. Some were deported back home, while others were sent to drug rehabilitation centers. But where will they go from there? And what about the girls who have yet to be discovered, who are still living in this living hell? Where will they go? Turf wars between gangs are inevitable. For a brutal organization like MS-13, its arch-enemy is the Mara 18 Inches Gang, or 18th Street Gang. Mara 18 is also a criminal organization whose members are mainly immigrants from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and other Central American countries. Just like MS-13, this gang thrived after the U.S. passed its immigrant deportation policy in 1996. To this day, within the U.S. alone, the number of Mara 18 members is estimated to be between 30,000 and 50,000. To gain control of territory, Mississippi, 13, and Mara 18 are constantly involved in bloody clashes. One of the most brutal events took place at Santa Ana Prison in El Salvador on January 5, 2017. At Santa Ana Prison, Mara 18 members clashed with guards, and the situation then escalated into a large-scale battle with MS-13. Hundreds of prisoners hacked and killed each other with anything they could use as a weapon. The frightened prison guards abandoned the camp, only daring to watch from a distance because they couldn't control the situation. The result of the massacre was 21 prisoners beheaded and dismembered, with hundreds more injured. The images recorded at the scene were horrifying, too much for many to bear. And the irony is that the deaths in that massacre didn't result in a victory for any side for the common good. In 2013, Mississippi 13 and Mara 18 signed a truce, which significantly reduced the crime rate not only in Central America, but also within the United States. However, just 1 year later, due to conflicts of interest, both gangs declared war on each other again. In El Salvador, for 1 month, an average of 16 people died every day in the bloody conflict between the two gangs. Then, for the sake of profit, they signed another truce. Currently, President Donald Trump still publicly talks about cracking down on MS-13. The U.S. government has been working with Central American nations to hunt down members and local leaders of the gang. However, Mississippi 13 continues to expand its forces, actively recruiting young people. They have even stepped up their criminal activities in Mexico, causing a series of murders and bloodshed every day. The war between the gangs and the government continues.